Number 10. Glass sponges. These mysterious creatures could give scientists the key to understanding some crucial components to climate change. At one time, this curious species of sponge was thought to be extinct, but then in 1987 a Canadian team of scientists discovered a cluster that was over 9,000 years old. It was over 9,000! That's pretty insane. Yeah, that's also a fact. They can live for thousands of years. They feed off plankton and other small sources of food and can filter enough water in 60 seconds to fill an Olympic-sized pool. They also don't look appetizing and mostly serve as homes to other kinds of fish and crustaceans and that stuff. Starfish tend to feed on them because they're really weird, but that's about it. The thing that makes them so interesting though is their ability to store carbon. Ever since the ice shelf started to disappear, they started appearing in Antarctica. They're called glass sponges because they're made of silica. If scientists are able to figure out the correlation between the two, then it might reveal some key factors about climate change. Can I say it never will be solved? Not quite, but it certainly does feel like a mystery worth solving. Number 9. The C-130. Another aircraft, gone without a trace. Chilean Air Force Flight C-130 left Patagonia, Chile and was bound for King George Island in Antarctica. They were meant to bring supplies and personnel to inspect a floating fuel supply line, but they never made it. They lost contact with the plane around 9:13 p.m. and no one heard anything about the plane having any issues. They conducted a search by air using aircrafts from the Chilean Air Force, Argentina, Brazil, UK, US and Uruguay, but nothing. There were no signs of the crash, that is until debris was found floating 31 kilometers from its last known position. But to this day, no one knows exactly what happened during that fateful crash that stole their lives. Number 8. The Gamburtsev Mountains. Actual mountains of ice will have to melt until this mystery is completely solved. Until then, it's a pretty marvelous mountainous mystery. Stretching across 1,200 kilometers and rising a third of the height of Mount Everest are the Gamburtsev Mountains, except they are hidden underneath 2 to 4 kilometers of ice. They are named after Gregory A. Gamburtsev, a Soviet geophysicist who made the discovery in 1958. From what they can tell through radar technology, the mountains are over 1 billion years old. They've been able to map the mountains by abnormal gravity fluctuations, but by all scientific reasons they should have eroded by now, but they haven't. One hypothesis is that the erosion process simply paused once the ice got thick enough, but still we won't really know the answer until we can fully look at those mountains, and it might take 1 billion years for that ice to melt, so who knows. Number 7. Shackleton's lost ship. Ooh, love a good lost ship story. Ironically, Captain Shackleton's ship was named the Endurance and was supposed to be ideal for navigating the icy waters of Antarctica. But alas, Sir Ernest Shackleton along with his faithful crew were forced to abandon ship in 1915. The Endurance became trapped by massive boulders of ice and then began to sink beneath the Weddell Sea. The crew escaped though, which is good, traveling 720 nautical miles before they were able to reach shore and be rescued. Researchers in the UK were captivated by its loss and desperately desired to retrieve it, and they finally attempted it in 2019. They got a whole team together, but unfortunately the escapade was unsuccessful. The submarine they sent looking for it ended up trapped down there as well. They never saw it again and were not able to find the wreckage while they were at it. So, whether or not the Endurance continues to endure beneath the waves of that unforgiving portion of the sea, we will never know. Or if they try again, who knows. Number 6. Edgar Evans. By all accounts, Edgar Evans was a positive, cheerful member of Robert Falcon Scott's soon-to-be doomed expedition to the South Pole. So when Edgar started to act distant and his temperament started changing, his team knew something was wrong. Canadian Dr. R.C.F. Falk came to the conclusion that he died from accidental anthrax poisoning in 1986. Anthrax could have been trapped within the ice, and Evans' mental and physical health declined when he hit his head on the Beardmore Glacier. The doctor on the crew believed it was due to damage to his skull. Then, as his symptoms changed, they thought it was scurvy, dehydration, or the high altitude causing the problems. But even before the Beardmore Glacier, his mood was changing, so it couldn't have been the fall or the ice. To this day, no one really knows how or why he died. He just didn't come back after lunch one day, and Scott recorded, "I was the first to reach the poor man and was shocked by his appearance. He was on his knees with his clothes disarrayed, hands covered and frostbitten, and a wild look in his eyes." Unquote. He later died, and the site of his grave has never been found, so without an autopsy, We may never find out. Number 5. Rodney Marks. This is a case colder than any iceberg in the South Pole, and it will forever remain that way. Rodney Marks was an astrophysicist who worked at the South Pole at the Amundsen Scott Base in 2000. He suddenly fell really ill and passed away, so they put his body into storage until a coroner could review him. Turns out the cause of death was methanol poisoning. Methanol was used as a cleaning solution at the base, and somehow lethal amounts of it were found in his system. And accidental ingestion were overruled when syringe marks were found in his arm. The question of murder arose instead. Mark's colleagues quickly left when the spring came before a proper inquiry could be made, and New Zealand police were met with a wall of silence. With the same people living day in and day out, who knows how high tensions rose, but with tons of evidence thrown away and the findings never released, this is one case that will remain frozen in more ways than one. Number 4. Xavier Mertz. For over a century, many believe the survival of Douglas Mawson during the 1912 South Pole expedition was an open and shut case. It was a miraculous case of human resilience, but historian David Dogg believes that Mawson's loyalty to his dying friend wasn't what it appeared to be. Their other accomplice died earlier on in the adventure when he fell into a crevice along with the sled and all their supplies. Mertz and Mawson only had a few things. They tried to make it back on rations, but Mertz died on January 27th. But Day thinks that Mawson cut the rations, therefore making Mertz perish first. Even with what they had to eat the sled dogs, and Mawson recorded they killed the last dog on December 28th, but he still described cooking dog meat on January 10th, leading Day to believe that he may have eaten another corpse lying around. Yeah. Mertz's body has never been found, and may never be, especially if nothing is left. Not even time will be able to reveal what really happened, so I guess I'll stay with Mawson. Number 3. The Anomaly. Who knows what is trapped beneath the billion-year-old ice that coats Antarctica? Mountains, disease, forests, who knows, but there's one thing that scientists can't quite unravel. Beneath Wilkes Land in Antarctica, there's an object 151 miles across and 2,700 feet deep that could change what we know of human history. Scientists believe that it may be from space, perhaps the asteroid that caused the Permian-Triassic extinction. It was first discovered in 2006 when NASA spotted gravitational changes in the area indicating an object of immense size. Is it an asteroid, or is it something bigger? Something so huge that it may even answer the age-old question of what else is out there. Some conspiracies revolve around a spaceship that may have crashed here billions of years ago. Whatever the case, we may not be around when the ice finally decides to reveal it. So that sucks for us, I guess. Number 2. The ship Jenny. Fact or fiction, the existence of the ship Jenny may be lost to history and continue to be dismissed as a myth. But here is the story so you can decide for yourself. The tale goes that Jenny became trapped in an ice barrier at the Drake Passage in 1823. It was allegedly discovered in 1840 by a whaling ship poetically called Hope, and the captain made a disturbing discovery. The ship looked as though it was still being manned, with 7 members of the crew standing to attention on the deck. But as they got closer, it was then they realized they were dead. The entire crew was preserved by the Antarctic cold. Even creepier was the logbook, which featured this entry. May 4th, 1823. No food for 71 days. I am the only one left alive. Unquote. The captain who wrote this was found sitting, still as death, in the chair. The tale has been romanticized in a novel called The Ghost Ship by John Conroy Hutchinson, so perhaps that's why people think it's just a story. But I guess we'll never know, will we? Number 1. Carl Robert Dish. Out of all the cases on this list, this one is definitely the most mysterious and will remain just that, a mystery. Carl worked for the National Bureau of Standards and was staying at Bird Station in 1965 just for the winter. Something he normally had to do was follow a hand line to the main station complex so he never got lost. But on May 8th, he went out on a trip he made over 25 times, only this time he didn't return. When he did not return to Bird Station, they went searching and did find a trail leading west. The weather was pretty bad and it was really dark, so the next day they decided to head out with vehicles. They found tracks again, heading south, but then they just disappeared. They noted that his steps seemed purposeful and that his stride didn't vary, like he was heading towards something. Searches continued for days and days, but no sign of Dirch was ever found. Number 10. Levadinsky's flight. The mystery of how Levadinsky's flight ended up lost in the first place isn't really a mystery. In 1937, a Soviet pilot named Sigismund was tasked with being the first pilot to fly a passenger plane over the North Pole. A project that should have taken a full year ended up being rushed into 3 months because they wanted to impress Stalin. Unsurprisingly, right from the start, the right engine was emitting smoke after it took off, which engineers said would stop. Well, it didn't. And 19 hours later, they attempted to make an emergency landing. But where the case gets interesting is that despite Russian, Canadian, and American rescue efforts combing the Arctic, there was not a trace of them to be found. The likeliest answer is that the plane sank into the icy depths, which they searched, but still nothing. A magnetic anomaly was detected at the bottom of a lake, but that was the only evidence ever found. They still didn't find the crash, so wherever they are, may they rest in peace. Number 9. The monster of Lake Liamna. The ocean is not the only place in the world we don't have all the answers to. Loch Ness has Nessie, Alaska has the monster of Lake Liamna. Reportings of a massive creature in the lake have been found from planes flying over it since the 1940s, as well as fishermen have seen some weird things. Traditionally, locals didn't fish in the lake because they thought it was dangerous because of this. There is some speculation that the creature they are seeing are white sturgeon fish, a breed of fish that used to be able to reach about 20 feet long, but nobody has ever found proof. So it could be a Greenland shark or the similar sleeper shark. Sturgeons are typically white and silvery, and many report the monster being black or dark in color. But evidence of neither shark breed have been found in the lake, so what is it? So the monster remains a mystery, sighting after sighting, without anyone getting a close enough look. Number 8. The disappearance of Henry Hudson. The Northwest Passage. Does anybody know that Stan Rogers song? It's a great song. The elusive pathway to the Orient that would lead whoever found it to treasures beyond imagining. It would just be a great trade route. While it currently exists today, many men died trying to find it or disappeared. Thus begins the mystery of Henry Hudson. Hudson was an English explorer who vanished in 1610 while he attempted to find this elusive pathway. Only rumors, theories, and some clues remain of him now. Hudson made several attempts at finding it, and at one time thought he succeeded when he sailed what is now known as the Hudson Strait. His ship, the Discovery, got stuck in the ice, and he promised the crew they'd sail back when it had thawed. But he lied, which blew up into a full mutiny. The mutineers put him, his sons, and some other members of the crew, with warm clothes and some food, which is very nice, into a small boat, and they were never seen from again. Some say they ended up in Danby Bay, some say they died on the island of Spitsbergen, or that they were captured, but still to this day, no one knows exactly what happened to Henry Hudson and his sons. Number 7. The Baffin Island Vikings. Canadian archaeologist Patricia Sutherland led a dig in 2012 in the north of the Arctic Circle on Baffin Island. She and her team found whetstones containing traces of copper alloy, materials that were foreign to the Inuit but were used by Vikings. This dig was prompted by the discovery of 2 strands of cloth in 1999, identical to the yarn Norse women made. This led Sutherland to believe that there was a strong Norse presence in the Arctic and would have been involved with trade. While it is a fact that Vikings actually lived on the east coast for a while, the real mystery surrounds Sutherland. While undergoing her research, she was fired out of nowhere from her post at the Canadian Museum of History. She says it's because they didn't want to fund a project that didn't support British voyages, while the museum was like, no, you harassed people and you suck to work with. That's not cool. What is the truth? Probably the latter. There was an 18-month investigation by an independent third party that determined it as harassment, but still, who do we believe? Who do we believe? Number 6. The Eagle Flight. Equipped with chocolate cake, a hydrogen balloon crafted of the finest varnished silk, and a whole lot of guts, Salomon August André attempted to reach the pole. He was a young Swedish engineer with big ideas for balloon technology in the 1870s. At that time, no expedition had ever succeeded in reaching the North Pole, and Salomon thought hydrogen balloons were the way to go. His balloon, the Ornen, the Eagle, was built in Paris with full financial backing from the Swedish king. By July 1897, André, Knut Franknol, and Nils Strindberg lifted off from Svalbard and were never seen alive again. The crew disappeared until 3 decades later. Geologists and sea hunters found the ruins of their camp. The skull of one of the travelers was entirely bleached white and, quote, lay there smiling dreadfully, unquote. According to the diary, the crew had to land 65 hours later and survived quite well for a while because they had chocolate cake and that's great. But when they attempted to reach Franz Josef Island, they failed and were lost on their return. But what exactly happened to them, we don't know. One of them might be attacked by a polar bear. There's just no way of knowing. They could have starved, probably. That might have happened. Let's move on. Number 5, Zeleny Yar. In 2014, a fantastic yet grim discovery was made in the Siberian Arctic. 34 shallow graves, 11 bodies shattered and crushed, plus 8 mummified bodies were shrouded in copper and wrapped in fur were found. All of them were buried pointing to the Gorny Poli River. With the extravagant burial process this community went to, archaeologists still aren't sure who they were. Who was this lost culture? They do believe that the mummification was an accident brought on by the non-oxidizing copper placed with the bodies. A year later, another set of remains were found in a birch bark cocoon, and inside was a small boy. So many questions swirl about this discovery, but as of yet, there is no clear answer. Research is ongoing though. Number 4, rain versus snow, aka rain snow? This mystery is boggling scientists, and if they don't solve it, it could have detrimental effects on Arctic wildlife as it already has. It's definitely one of the weirdest things to happen due to climate change. In the northern area, snow slowly turns into rain, but instead of melting the snow, it seeps into the cracks underground. This snow/rainwater seeps through and forms a solid frozen layer of soil, like a thick shield which blocks the vegetation. This is a massive problem for animals like the muskox, as their food source is no longer available. It is due to this phenomenon that 20,000 of them starved to death in 2003 due to rain snow on Banks Island in Canada. They even tried to find food on floating ice but drifted away. I hope this issue gets solved, but based on the lack of change we are making towards hindering global warming, it may never be. Number 3, mysterious craters. So if you watch the ice melt in your drink, you can sometimes see little holes pop in through the top. So when I came across this so-called mysterious craters popping up in Siberia, I thought it was just melting ice. I'm no scientist, but with global warming, that makes sense. Since the 1960s, the largest one of these craters was discovered and retreats 15 meters every year. But it gets even stranger when on June 28, 2017, locals noticed flames and columns of smoke near the village of Sakaya. The same area, 10 new craters were discovered. There are some pretty wild theories about what they are. Of course some involve aliens. They say the holes are left by UFOs finally emerging from the ice, or that they're gates to other worlds. I don't know. A more scientific explanation are the methane reserves trapped in the ice exploding. There's still more research to do. Number 2, Inventio Fortunata. The Inventio Fortunata was a travel log that helped many European explorers map the pole. Thing is, no one knows who wrote it. It was allegedly the description of a voyage by a Franciscan priest from Oxford, but it changed hands so many times no one is sure. In 1360 it was presented to the English crown, and then someone lost it. Then a Dutchman named Jacobus Canoyen included information from it, but then his travel book got lost. Luckily his version was quoted, so we have some idea of what the Fortunata actually said about the pole, but we have no idea where the original might be. The influence of this mysterious document lasted all the way up to the 17th century, but it was a huge reason researchers were able to map it in the first place. But who wrote it and where did they go are two questions that remain. And last but not least, the Alaska Triangle. Just sliding into the Arctic Circle, we have the freezer burn version of the Bermuda Triangle. A massive expanse of icy terrain in Alaska where many have gone and few have returned. This 32,000 square mile area has claimed the lives of 16 to 20,000 people since the 1980s alone. From hikes to passenger plane crashes, no one who has disappeared in the Alaska Triangle has ever been recovered. The disappearance of Majority Leader Hale Boggs is the most famous case, as it launched one of the largest rescue operations the US has ever seen. In 1972, he and his plane vanished over the Alaska Triangle, and despite 39 days of searching, the use of 40 military aircrafts and 50 civilian planes, not a trace of him was ever found. No debris, evidence of collision, or remains, nothing. Even before Boggs in the 1950s, 44 passengers and the pilot disappeared, and in the 1990s, a Cessna 340 carrying 4 people also vanished. The Alaska Triangle could very well be the largest mass grave in the world, and who knows if any of the bodies will ever be found.
And we're kicking off this list with pyramids. So a couple years back, satellite images revealed a mysterious triangular formation in Antarctica's desolate landscape. When the images hit social media, debates and speculations about the origin of this quote-unquote pyramid began, the pyramid shape appeared in satellite images of the Ellsworth mountain range located in the southern reaches of Antarctica. It seemed to have a striking resemblance to the dimensions of Egypt's iconic Great Pyramid of Giza, measuring 2 kilometers in each direction from its square base. And as these images circulated on social media platforms, the conspiracy theories began to flow. Now, scientists attribute these formations to natural processes and optical illusions, but perhaps there's a deeper secret being hidden from us in the cold, inhospitable terrain of Antarctica. Was there some ancient civilization that used to call the South Pole home? Did a group of beings from somewhere beyond our planet construct it? I don't know, I'm just here to ask the important questions. And now I'm here to tell you that if you are liking our channel so far, if you're new here, why not hit that subscribe button? We have awesome videos coming at you on the daily, plenty to see. Don't miss out. Do that right now. Next up, we have the ANITA discovery. The Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, or ANITA, is a sophisticated scientific tool in the form of a high-tech balloon operated by NASA, floating above Antarctica. Its mission is to track subatomic particles generated by the interactions of high-energy neutrinos entering Earth's atmosphere from the depths of space. But a few years ago, ANITA made a strange discovery. It detected neutrinos seemingly originating from beneath the Earth's surface, quite the departure from its intended function of capturing spaceborne neutrinos. One of the more fun hypotheses behind this is that these detected particles may be signs of a possible parallel universe where the fundamental laws of our own universe might operate in complete reverse. Now, this is really just speculative, but it's a pretty fascinating idea. Scientists were pretty perplexed by these findings, and as of right now, there still isn't a definitive explanation. At number 8, we have the Ross Island haunting. Ross Island is not only home to the McMurdo Station, a hub for scientific research, it also harbors something much darker. It's rumored to be haunted. There was a tragic plane crash on the island in 1979, and this crash claimed the lives of 257 people. Over the years, visitors to Ross Island have reported unsettling occurrences, describing ghostly footsteps echoing in the icy darkness and mysterious voices that seem to emanate from nowhere. Some claim to have come face to face with full-on apparitions, believing to be the restless spirits of the plane crash victims, wandering the frigid, snow-covered landscape for eternity. The haunting stories surrounding Ross Island have continued to be passed down through generations of Antarctic explorers and researchers. Number 7, the UFO crash landing. In 2018, an ex-Navy SEAL who had worked in the South Pole revealed some intriguing information to an investigative journalist named Linda Moulton Howe about an alien structure he once visited. He wished to remain anonymous as this information was highly classified. In August of 2003, this individual and his team had been tasked with a highly classified objective under the guise of a research reconnaissance mission. They arrived at their destination where they found a large dark structure protruding from the ice. There were doors on it, these big square slabs cut into the structure that when you push on kind of receded into the building, opening up into this long hallway. The inside of the structure was lit green by an unknown source, and adorning the walls were strange hieroglyphics. But they didn't resemble any hieroglyphics seen here on Earth. This is a pretty outlandish story. Impossible to prove, but hard to discredit completely because it's just hearsay, really, but it is fascinating. Plus, Antarctica is one of the most unpopulated places on Earth. It would be a good spot for little green men from space to operate without the presence of prying eyes. So let's stay on the topic of UFOs for a minute and discuss another possible UFO crash landing in Antarctica, this time spotted with satellite images. YouTube channel Secure Team 10 shared a video back in 2018 zooming close in on a small island just off the coast of Antarctica, which seemed to show a long long, sharp mark in the snow, as if something had crashed and then skidded along. Now, this island has the exact same environment as Antarctica. It seems to be a piece of it that broke off and floated away. So it's inhospitable, totally void of people. So what is this object? The narrator describes it as cigar-shaped, covered by mounds of snow. Whatever the object is, it's also very large, and the trail it left behind is almost 1,000 meters long. The trail behind this mysterious object leads to a mountain, and there's debris that seems to have been pushed out at the base. It looks like as if the object flew down and crashed into the mountain before skidding along the ice where it now sits. Part of me thinks there could have been an avalanche or something on the mountain, and maybe this is just a piece of rock that slid out extra far. I don't know. What do you all think, though? At number 5, we have Scott's Hut. Back to the haunted realm now. In 1911, 25 men led by Sir Robert Scott departed from this hut in Cape Evans on an expedition to the South Pole, an expedition they would never return from. The hut now stands just as it did all those years ago. There are belongings laying around, scientific equipment, even the frozen penguins the group had been studying remain on the outside of the hut. It's almost completely frozen in time. And as intriguing as it would be to give this place a visit, staff and visitors do claim to have an odd feeling when stepping inside it. There's a sadness about the place, an emptiness, a place that was so full of life, with daring explorers about to begin an epic journey, never to come back. Only maybe they did come back. It's no surprise that with an eerie history like that, some folks believe the hut to be haunted. Ghostly whispers, shadowy figures, a sense of not being alone. These are just some of the things guests have reported during their visits. Number 4, the giant hole. In 2017, researchers in Antarctica observed a massive polynya, a large area of open water within the sea ice, suddenly appearing. It was already massive, but things got even crazier when the polynya expanded at an unprecedented rate, increasing in size by more than 8 times within just a few weeks. The discovery was made in Weddell Sea, an area known for its harsh freezing conditions. Polynyas are not uncommon in Antarctica, but their sudden and substantial growth is a more rare occurrence. That puzzled the researchers. These gaps in the ice are usually maintained by complex processes, ocean currents, temperature variations, but the rapid expansion of this particular one challenged existing scientific understanding. Researchers and climate experts were left with a series of questions. What was causing this rapid expansion? Was it related to climate change, natural variability, or some other unknown factor? And the scientific community set out to study this event with the use of satellite imagery, ocean sensors, and computer models. But the prevailing theory is that the polynya was caused by intense cyclones. Alright, next let's talk about all the military presence in Antarctica. What's going on there? Let's start by going all the way back to World War II. There have been rumors for decades that Mr. H himself, the dictator of Germany, might have established a covert base in Antarctica. As for what they were doing there are lots of rumors, but the SS were super into mysticism and the occult, always in pursuit of ancient artifacts that they believed had powers that could aid in their conquest. Pretty wild, but maybe they were after something hidden somewhere in the frozen tundra. After the war in 1946 and 47, the US sent a huge fleet to Antarctica, and many believe that they had been tasked with destroying this secret German base. As for more contemporary military activities, who knows what's going on? Just imagine vast hidden research facilities buried beneath the ice, or cutting-edge technology being tested in the harshest conditions imaginable. Conspiracies suggest everything from advanced weaponry to secretive scientific experiments related to climate change or extraterrestrial phenomena. Who knows? And number 2 is Deception Island. Deception Island, nestled in the icy expanse of Antarctica, holds a chilling history that goes beyond its freezing temperatures. Once a bustling whalers station, remnants of this grim past still linger in the form of whale bones strewn across some of its beaches, a reminder of an industry that relentlessly hunted these beautiful creatures. When the Great Depression hit and oil prices plummeted, the whalers station was abandoned, only to be repurposed later as a British World War II base. Now today, visitors to Whalers Bay, a landing site on this island, have shared tales of their experiences. Some have have reported witnessing eerie apparitions, strange orbs of light. Some have even claimed to hear disembodied voices echoing across the ice. In 2009, when the crew of the American TV show Destination Truth ventured to the bay, they captured unexplained bangs and the unsettling sight of a shadowy figure roaming among the decaying ruins. The crew even captured a thermal signature in a window and an SOS signal emanating from one of the abandoned shacks. But finally, we have the theory that Atlantis could have been located deep beneath the ice of Antarctica. According to Plato, Atlantis was this advanced civilization that mysteriously vanished overnight. Now, when we think of Atlantis, we usually picture it in the sunny Mediterranean, not, buried under all that ice down south. But here's the twist. Antarctica wasn't always an icy wasteland. Millions of years ago, it had forests and a much milder climate. So some folks propose that Atlantis could have existed in Antarctica before it froze over, or some other ancient civilization. They point to satellite images showing peculiar shapes under the ice, speculating that these could be remnants of the lost city. We already talked about a pyramid earlier. That could have something to do with it. Scientists, though, of course, remain skeptical. They've been studying Antarctica for years, haven't found any concrete evidence to support this idea, but it's fun to think about. Could that pyramid shape, again, possibly play into this? Who knows?
Starting off this countdown, we have the UFOs. There are tons of urban legends surrounding Antarctica. In particular, it's thought that aliens once lived there after crashing into one of the mountains. From there, it's believed that they had their own secret base there. While in 2019, UFO hunter Scott Waring was on Google Maps looking at Antarctica from above when he spotted what he thought to be a UFO trapped under Antarctica's ice. According to Scott, he was looking over an island in Antarctica when he saw the craft. He said it was triangular in shape, has a hump in the middle, and it has a thicker edge. He believes that with global warming melting more and more of Antarctica, that the craft, which was once lodged in the ice, is slowly starting to reveal itself. But of course, no one has actually gone out to that spot to investigate what it might be. So it could just be ice, or it could be a real alien spacecraft. Now, I'm just a little concerned when that thing fully thaws. Like, I don't need no aliens coming back to life. No, thank you. In our 9th spot, we have the Loch Ness Monster. And if you guys are liking this video so far, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up, because you know what? It really helps us out. A couple of years ago, another man was on Google Maps when he saw what looked to be a big monster lurking in the water. It was this massive dark mass that had a lot of people terrified. But later it was debunked, saying that it was just a bunch of rocks. But did you know that a real-life Loch Ness Monster did once roam Antarctica? Yeah, over the course of a number of expeditions, scientists have discovered fossilized remains of a massive creature. And they say it's unlike anything they have ever seen. These remains are over 70 million years old and are from a creature that would have weighed about 15 tons. Not only that, but this thing was massive. It was 36 feet long. Now, it's considered to be part of the Elasmosaurid family, but this thing is the largest of its kind ever found. In our 8th spot, we have the Blood Falls. Now, if you're visiting Antarctica, this for sure would give you a heart attack. So they have something they refer to as the Blood Falls. There's a place where it literally looks like it's gushing out blood. It's like when the elevator doors open in The Shining and then like all that blood just gushed out. Yeah, that's what it looks like. So this was discovered back in 1911 by an Australian geologist. But don't worry, it's not actually blood. At first, it was thought that it was a result of microscopic red algae. But in 2003, it was actually discovered that the color was a result of oxidized iron. Nonetheless, it looks very creepy. In fact, I've seen this image circling around the web before, and people are using it as a PSA of like all the animals that have died in the Arctic and that's their blood. Clearly, it's false, but again, a very creepy image. Moving on to number 7, we have the creatures. Antarctica is home to a number of very creepy looking creatures. It was previously thought that because of its harsh conditions, nothing could survive there. But scientists have discovered a number of weird species that have adapted to survive in the environment. First off, let's talk about the sea spider. Now, Antarctica isn't the only place that has these creatures. But actually, the sea spiders in Antarctica are massive. In Europe, these spiders are about the size of your fingernail. In Antarctica, they're the size of a large dinner plate. Now, technically, they aren't actually spiders, even though they have 8 legs. They belong to a class of species called pycnogonids instead of arachnids. Seriously, these creatures are terrifying looking. It's like a mixture of a crab and a spider. And those legs are super long. What's super weird about them is that they pump blood with their guts. This is the first time that this kind of circulatory system has been seen in nature. And they breathe through their skin, which actually allows more oxygen to be absorbed into their bodies, which allows them in turn to grow bigger over time. How great. Coming in at number 6, we have the plane crash. In the 1970s, Antarctica, for some reason, was the place to travel to. Tons of tourists from New Zealand were booking day trips to Antarctica. However, one of these trips ended very badly. Due to low visibility, the plane crashed at the side of Mount Erebus. To this day, remnants of the crash are still there on the mountain. As for the passengers on board, well, their bodies were removed and stored at an American base on Ross Island. Many visitors to this day believe that this site is haunted by the ghosts of the passengers who died in the crash. People have heard eerie voices, felt ghostly presences, and have discovered unexplained footprints. One of the workers at the station experienced this all himself and is convinced it's haunted. So yeah, there's ghosts in Antarctica. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the ghost towns. Believe it or not, but Antarctica is filled with ghost towns. This is from humans trying to live there, but ultimately finding the weather conditions to be way too harsh, and then they end up just leaving. And they leave everything behind. As a result, there are tons of abandoned buildings and structures all over Antarctica, from military bases to research stations to huts. You get the picture. Back in the early 2000s, however, a team of scientists went to Antarctica and found something very disturbing. While exploring some of the abandoned buildings, they found several frozen bodies. Most likely, these people weren't properly equipped for the cold. But still, that must have been a horrifying find. In our 4th spot, we have the bristle worm. Okay, if you thought the sea spiders were bad, wait until you hear about this bad boy. This is something straight out of your nightmares. Basically, it's a worm-type creature with bristles, hence the name bristle worm. Its nasty-looking bristles help it crawl along the ocean floor and swim, and also to protect itself. This creature also has pretty sharp teeth, and it's a carnivore. So, you know, there's that. Oh, and it extends its jaws to catch its prey. It gets worse. This thing is huge. It can grow to more than 20 centimeters long and 10 centimeters wide. No, thank you. No, that's just no. And the part of the creature that looks like it would be its head, no, that's its throat. I know, I'm grossed out too. And at number 3, we have the penguin mummies. I mean, like ancient Egypt mummies, not like the penguin's mom. So in 2016, a group of scientists discovered hundreds of mummified penguins in Antarctica. Since Antarctica has little precipitation and is dry and cold, it can mummify animals much like a desert would. In fact, it's still considered a desert even though it's cold. Well, anyway, scientists found a large amount of mummified penguins, many of which were just chicks. Some of the birds were from 200 years ago, others were from 750 years ago, all still perfectly preserved. It's thought that these birds died because of global warming. The weather drastically changed on these animals and it caused them to slowly die. Nonetheless, it must have been pretty creepy to arrive there only to find a graveyard of mummies. In our 2nd spot, we have the monument. In 2009, a bunch of scientists in Antarctica discovered something rather strange. It was a monument with a bust of Vladimir Lenin on top, the former premier of the Soviet Union. After digging around the half-buried monument, they discovered an old Soviet Union military base, which by then was covered completely in snow. Had it not been for the monument sticking out, they probably would have never found it. Here's where it gets strange. After they unearthed this monument, the men began to become haunted by Lenin's ghost, and other explorers have claimed to have seen a ghostly apparition in that area, and they claim it looks exactly like him. Freaky, I know. Sometimes what's buried is sometimes better left buried. And in our number one spot, we have the ghost ship. Back in 1823, a boat named the Jenny left port on an exploration. However, along the way, something went wrong, and it seems like the men aboard starved and then froze to death. The boat then got trapped in the ice in Antarctica. Several years later, a crew passing by noticed the ship and decided to climb aboard to see what's up. There they found the entire crew frozen to death, perfectly preserved. One of the last journal entries from the captain read, May 4th, 1823. No food for 71 days. I am the only one left alive.
Number 10, hidden lakes. So it took working at a champagne restaurant to find out that salt water doesn't freeze. Well, it does, but at very, very low temperatures. We used to use it to hyperchill wine that was in storage because salty water can get colder than 0 degrees Celsius without freezing. The saltier the water, the colder it gets because salt lowers the freezing point because it interferes with the water molecule's ability to form crystals, which is at least one reason why Deep Lake in Antarctica has stayed liquid for millions of years. It sits 55 meters below the sea level, and the salinity of the water increases as it gets deeper. Despite temperatures reaching minus 20 degrees Celsius, the lake remains in a liquid state, though entirely uninhabitable, or so they thought. Scientists uncovered at least 4 microbe species living in the water, but that's about the only thing that can. Because the water can reach much colder temperatures than the sea, even penguins wouldn't survive for long. They have been caught swimming in it, but it would feel to them what it feels like for us jumping into an icy lake for a polar dip. You know, if they stay too long, it would probably kill them. How the lake formed exactly still has scientists baffled, but they're probably, but let's be honest, they'll probably figure it out. Number 9, rainforests? Press rewind on the world for long enough and you would arrive in a world of opposites, which includes Antarctica being closer to a rainforest than an icy tundra. Scientists gather that before Antarctica was an expanse of ice, the region may have been host to lush forests, diverse wildlife, and even early human civilizations. But why do they think that? Scientists began discovering fossilized wood, leaf impressions, and signs of tropical trees. On top of that, they have found tons of fossils of marine animals, dinosaurs, and birds from the Cretaceous period, so you can see how they deduced the existence of some kind of forest-like area. Scientists are now looking to Antarctica for clues about evolution that we may have missed. So far, they've discovered a 50 million year old sperm cell on the egg case of a long extinct worm species, which is extraordinary if you think about it. Man, like, talk about resilience, buddy. Number 8. Mountains. Imagine the ice melts away, and beneath those massive, vast sheets of ice is an entire mountain range. Well, guess what? You don't have to imagine it, it's real. Hiding out beneath a 2 to 4 kilometer thick sheet of ice are what's called the Gamburtsev Mountains. They stretch across 1,200 kilometers and rise about a third of the height of Mount Everest. But how did an entire mountain range that high get covered in a sheet of ice? When Soviet geophysicist Grigory A. Gamburtsev made the discovery in 1958, he had the same question, though he hasn't actually seen the mountains covered by ice, remember, but was able to figure out that they were there by measuring the abnormal gravity fluctuations in the area. They have since used radars to interpret the physical attributes of the mountains, but how did they end up that far beneath the ice? The mountains are around 1 billion years old, and scientists figure they should have eroded away by now. But the most popular theory as to why they are still there is that the erosion process just paused as soon as the ice sheet got large enough. To picture how immense this is, just imagine that the Rocky Mountains are covered by a sheet of ice. Astounding. Number 7. Dangerous bacteria. Have you ever heard of Pandora's box? Well, it may surprise you to learn that Antarctica might very well just be that. Scientists have discovered microbes beneath Antarctic ice that could threaten life on planet Earth. Maybe. Ice is an excellent preservation method, and the 420,000-year-old microbes may only need to melt in order to come back to life. Now, it is equally likely that these microbes could be entirely harmless, but there is a chance that they won't be. But the fact that it could be so dangerous has scientists keeping tabs on them as closely as possible. Still, it sounds like a Stephen King apocalyptic horror film waiting to happen, so who the heck knows. We didn't see the past 2 years happening, did we? Number 6. Blood Falls. Blood Falls. Get your mind out of the gutter. Sounds pretty terrifying, as it would have been for the person who first discovered it. In the McMurdo Dry Valley, there's a bright crimson river that cuts between Taylor Glacier and Lake Bonny. It looks like someone went to town on their dinner and just let the bodies drain into the water, but thank goodness there's a scientific explanation. Beneath the glacier, there's a very briny lake that was cut off from the atmosphere and is 3 times as salty as seawater, meaning, as we know now, that it can't really freeze, but it can, I guess, at a very low level. At first, it was suspected that a kind of red algae had infiltrated the glacier, causing the vibrant red hue, but in actuality, the briny lake is incredibly high in iron, and since it was cut off from oxygen for millions of years, the red color is a product of the reaction the water has to the oxygen and the sunlight from the atmosphere. The iron in the water oxidizes and rusts, like your car, which brings out the vibrant red illusion that is Blood Falls. Number 5. Ancient meteorites. You may think meteorites and asteroids are dangerous, but something far less obvious may cause more damage than a doom rock. 430,000 years ago, smack dab in the middle of the Pleistocene epoch, a massive space rock the size of a soccer field crashed through Earth's atmosphere, but instead of smashing into the Earth, an airburst happened. Just before it slammed into the ice, it burst into pieces, exploding in the sky, and launched a superheated jet of gas. The explosion caused massive amounts of damage, scattering pieces of itself everywhere, which is how scientists were able to deduce that this happened. They found pieces of the asteroid across the ice and used chemical clues to link the particles together. They were also able to determine that the force of the blast was about, get ready, 1,000 times stronger than the nuclear blast at Hiroshima, and that destroyed an entire city, so imagine what would have happened if that happened today. Number 4. Oil guzzling fungi. So we mentioned that there might be a world-ending microbes beneath the ice, but there also could be something that saves it. A unique kind of fungi has been found beneath the ice gorging on petroleum. What on earth could that possibly be used for, you ask? Well, if these fun little guys love eating oil so much, then imagine how happy they'd be to dive into, let's say, an oil spill. They were first encountered when scientists came upon fuel containers left by explorers and immediately began studying them. Fungi don't usually just flourish at parties, they flourish in warm wooded regions, but perhaps the fungus that used to thrive in the rainforests we mentioned, they evolved to thrive in the icy barren conditions as well. So cool. We could learn so much about evolution that way. Number 3, top 3. Singing ice. Yup, the ice is singing. After scientists installed seismic sensors in the ice to measure its behavior, they discovered a mysterious song. Well, more like a massive ice drum. And it sounds like this. The pitch changes based on the weather, though you wouldn't be able to hear it should you just stand on it. It's not audible to the human ear, but the humming occurs on the 500,000 square kilometer on the Ross Ice Shelf, about the size of France. The winds blowing across the snow dunes is what causes the humming, and scientists figure that this could be an even better way to keep tabs on how the ice is doing in relation to global warming. The ice is thinning due to global warming, and the song is almost a gift, an easier way to track the stability and vulnerability of the ice shelf. Sounds like nature is working with us to save itself. Number 2, cosmic particles. A mystery capable of breaking physics. If that were possible, it would be found in Antarctica. Since March 2016, researchers have been furrowing their brows over 2 distinct events that shouldn't have happened. Physicists caught cosmic rays that burst out from the Earth, not from space. The rays were detected by ANITA, NASA's Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna, a balloon-borne antenna. The balloon is designed to find cosmic rays from outer space, and caused a lot of excitement when it caught them coming up from the Earth instead. The discovery even implied theories that could support parallel universes. What boggled scientists about this discovery is that two particles seem to be cosmic rays that blasted through the planet and back out the other side. They shouldn't be able to do that. They now suspect that they may be particles that defy the standard model of how particles are supposed to behave, and maybe they're a new type of particle altogether. This is obviously a very simplistic explanation. It gets a lot more complicated and there's still more information out there, but still, really, really cool. And last but not least, a hidden German base. There are several versions of this story, some even going so far as theorizing that World War II mustache man escaped there and didn't die in his bunker. Some theories even say that German intelligence encountered aliens and developed new weapons with their tech. But the one truth is that there was indeed a secret World War II German base in Antarctica. Apparently there was an expedition to establish a base as a whaling station in order to increase Germany's production of fat, which could be used for soap and mayonnaise and butter. The expedition was led by Alfred Richter, and other theories suggest Adolf himself sent the expeditions to research ways Germany could become a self-supporting country. Perhaps the reason was that innocent, but with the base having been abandoned 70 years ago, we will never know. Starting us off at number 10, we have Deception Island. In 1906, a Norwegian-Chilean whaling company started using Whalers Bay as a base for their factory ship. Other operations followed closely behind them, and then the next thing you know, a boomtown was born. But then, by just 1931, after a sweeping decline in the market for whale oil due to the Great Depression, the island was abandoned. Since then, it has quite literally become a ghost town, with visitors reporting seeing strange orbs of light coming from the abandoned huts, seeing apparitions of people walking around, and even hearing disembodied voices. So while the South Pole remains a harsh land with no official permanent population, it seems that ghosts who are unaffected by what makes the South Pole so difficult to endure have settled in and haunt all those who try to enter their domain. Next up at number 9, Wordie Hut. Although it's named after James Wordie, who was the chief scientist for Sir Edmund Shackleton's endurance expedition in 1914, the Wordie Hut was built much later in 1947. For years it had been rumored to be haunted by terrifying spirits, and after several reports, a group of paranormal researchers from Destination Truth decided to see for themselves and spend a night in the hut. When they arrived, they were immediately taken back by the energy of the cabin. They knew that something was there. That night, members of the team heard frantic flipping of light switches and slamming doors from rooms where no one was staying. Jars began falling off the shelves all on their own, and after their one-night stay, they left completely creeped out. Now, I always think a telling tale of if some place is truly scary is when paranormal investigators, people whose job is literally to investigate creepy stuff, get scared and don't want to come back. Well, even so, visitors have checked it out since, but all reported similar events that chilled them to the bone and have never returned. Next up at number 8, the ghost ship of Jenny. Thought to have been abandoned in port in 1823, this ship was thought to be lost forever. That was until a whaling ship made a horrifying discovery a few years later, back in 1840. As the legend goes, Jenny had gotten stuck in the ice while on its expedition, and no one knew where it had ended up or what had happened to the crew aboard. That was until the whaling ship discovered them, and believing it to be the legendary Jenny, decided to go on board to check out what might still be on it. When they made their way onto the ship, they were horrified to find all the bodies frozen solid and perfectly preserved by the ice. Allegedly, the crew found a note they believed to be written by the captain that read, May 4th, 1823. No food for 71 days. I am the only one left alive. While some believe it's just folklore, others swear by the tale, claiming all the sailors of Jenny haunt the boat to this day. Coming in at number 7, Mountains of Madness. While Antarctica may be one of the most haunted places in the world, it is also home to some breathtaking scenery. But the Mountains of Madness kind of fall into the first category. Officially called the Gamburtsev mountain range, they are roughly the size of the Alps, but there is one catch. No one has ever seen them. But how could that be, I am sure you are wondering? Well, back in the 1950s, a group of Russian explorers discovered there were strange gravity fluctuations coming from below the ice. After a bit of sleuthing, they discovered the fluctuations to be from an entire subglacial mountain range hidden below 3 miles of ice. First of all, the fact that there is 3-mile deep ice is enough of a reason for me to never want to go there, but I digress. Scientists have compared it to studying another planet, which to some might be exciting, but to others they feel it's terrifying. No one knows what kind of life could be under there, what could have been preserved there for the last 250 million years. And some have even said they've felt a strange presence when they are near. Coming in at number 6, Shackleton's Hut. Antarctica is mainly a destination visited by scientists and explorers, but considering many of the early explorers died while on these trips, it also makes a lot of sense as to why they are all haunted. And one man who claimed to be a non-believer of ghosts would return from his trip thinking much differently. His name was Sir Edmund Hillary, and he was a New Zealand mountaineer and explorer who in 1953, along with his Sherpa, was the first known person to reach the summit of Mount Everest. So after conquering the mountain, he was looking for another adventure and sought out the South Pole 5 years later. When he arrived, he stayed in Sir Ernest Shackleton's abandoned hut from his famous endurance expedition. And when he was there, he claims to have seen Shackleton's ghost walk towards him and welcome him to the hut before vanishing right in front of his eyes. Ever since, it's been known as a paranormal hotspot, and many who visit leave terrified by what they see. Next up at number 5, Scott's Hut. During the early 1900s, there was a huge race to be the first country to reach the South Pole. Then in 1911, explorer Robert Falcon Scott and his team set out on a mission against Norway, later called the Terra Nova expedition, to do just that. While many explorers, Scott included, had explored Antarctica, none had managed to reach the pole, and so the race was on. A hut was pre-constructed in Britain that was brought over as a base camp for the crew, and they set up near the Great Ice Barrier. Eventually, it was decided some of the men would stay behind with supplies and shelter, and the rest of the team would venture out further. But sadly, their mission was ultimately a bust, as by the time they reached the pole, the Norwegian flag had already been planted. So the men turned around to head back, but sadly due to frostbite, starvation, and disease, the men died off one by one and never made their return. Those that have visited the hut today claim to hear strange voices and footsteps all around the cabin. Apparently, the minute you walk in, you feel as though you're being watched, and some even swear they've seen the ghosts of Scott and his men lurk inside. Next up at number 4, Ross Island. Home to one of the most recognized research stations across the continent, it's also the site of a devastating plane crash that left the island drowning in lost spirits. Back in 1977, New Zealand began operating sightseeing trips via plane over Antarctica, but in 1979, a true disaster would strike. Though exactly what happened is unknown, somehow the computer directing the flight got rerouted, and instead of taking its usual trip, it ended up flying dangerously close to a nearby mountain. All of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, the plane crashed, instantly killing all 257 passengers and crew members on board. Today, those that visit the island claim to hear unsettling voices in the darkness, as well as strange ghostly footsteps. Some say they have even seen what they believe to be the flight victims wandering around the frigid landscape, eerily moaning and crying at night. So while there may be some beautiful places to visit, you might want to steer clear of this haunted island altogether. Coming in at number 3, a Soviet military base. Back Back in 2009, scientists passing through the icy scape came across a strange and concerning discovery. While exploring what's called the Pole of Inaccessibility, which is the point furthest from the sea in Antarctica, the group found a random monument with a bust of Vladimir Lenin perched on top. Now, if you don't know who that is or why that's a little bit creepy, let me explain. Vladimir Lenin was the founder of the Soviet Union and first head of government under the new regime. It was under his ruling that Russia became a one-party communist state. So upon discovering his lone bust in the middle of nowhere, the scientists decided it might be a good idea to keep exploring. After some digging, they happened upon an old Soviet military base that was covered by mountains of snow, and they realized that the bust was facing the direction of Moscow. Now, no one knows how long the bust has been there, and even creepier, no one knows why it's there. But many suspect that it might be the place where Lenin was buried back in 1924, and it's thought that his ghost may still haunt the area to this day. Coming in at number 2, Mount Erebus. Mount Erebus is the southernmost volcano on Earth, and it's still very much active. Some like to refer to it as the place where fire meets ice, as while inside the mountain it's swirling with molten hot magma, the outside remains frozen solid and is surrounded by ice caves. And while that might sound super cool, it is also the site of the infamous Ross Island plane crash that I already spoke about, and so it's littered with ghosts seeking revenge for having their lives taken too soon. And while many of the spirits are known to roam around the entire island, frightening visitors at every chance, some of the spirits are stuck in the place that took their lives. Some say that if you walk past the mountain, you can still hear the screams of the victims who lost their lives to the crash. And last up in our number 1 spot, we have the Drake Passage. The Drake Passage may just be the most well-known part of all of Antarctica, but probably not for a good reason. Widely considered the most powerful convergence of seas, the Drake Passage is the point where the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean converge with the southern seas, and it is notorious for its treacherous waters. It's a great feat for anyone to even dare to cross it, and it's estimated over the years that more than 1,000 people have died attempting to pass through its terrifying and turbulent waves. Many believe that all who have lost their lives to the passage remain, haunting the waters to warn those that attempt the feat to turn back. Or maybe they're trying to bring you into their realm with them. Either way, it's best to stay far, far, far away, because even if the ghosts don't get you, the waves almost certainly will.